Hello and welcome to Nightshade's Ramblings. Today we'll be discussing Miller's Girl. Miller's Girl is a 2024 Netflix film starring Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. It's labeled as a thriller, but I wouldn't call it that. More on that later. To some fans, it's hot, deep, and intriguing, but to others, it's creepy. Why is this? Well, let's talk about it. And a warning, there will be spoilers. Miller's Girl features the protagonist Pyra Sweet, an 18-year-old girl living alone in Tennessee. He chooses Jonathan Miller's creative writing class and impresses him with skill. He also reads his book, Apostrophes and Ampersands. The two form a connection. Meanwhile, Cairo's best friend Winnie attempts to seduce her teacher. Winnie tells Cairo that she should do the same with Miller, telling her that he's obviously attracted to her. Proving Winnie's point, or at least proving it to Cairo, Miller asks Cairo to talk to him after school. When Cairo meets him, he quotes a line from her writing project. He responds by quoting his book. Impressed, he offers her an opportunity to get a quote-unquote jump start on the midterm, write a story mimicking an author's style. He also tells her about poetry salons held in town in an attempt to get her to enjoy Tennessee. For her author, Thyra chooses Henry Miller, who I thought was related to Jonathan, but is not, and he allows it despite having reservations due to the erotic content of Henry Miller's stories. Miller, Jonathan, not Henry, accidentally takes Cairo's phone with him as he leaves, and Cairo calls him to ask to have it returned. When he arrives at her home, she greets him in a provocative dress and kisses him in the rain. Cairo attends a poetry salon with Miller and enjoys it, sharing a cigarette with him outside. When she turns in her short story, Miller reads it and discovers it to be an erotic piece about an English teacher and a student. Upon their next meeting in school, he deems it to be inappropriate and threatens to fail Cairo if she does not choose another author, as well as telling her that there is nothing between them. Cairo berates him in the classroom and quotes a negative review of his story that he shared with her earlier. A woman scorned, she sends the short story to Vice Principal Manor. Manor questions Cairo and Jonathan separately, and Miller tries his best to escape the situation. Being incriminated by Cairo's answers, however, he receives probation. His close friend and fellow teacher calls him out for not having limits, and he has an argument with his wife about their relationship. Winnie finds out what consequences Cairo's accusations are having and asks her to drop the charges against Miller, telling her she'll testify against her in court. Cairo manipulates her by reminding her of the justice texts she sent to another teacher, which would incriminate him as well if they were shared. Finally, she writes her experiences into an admissions essay for Yale. The film ends with her seeing Miller outside a courtroom, herself being close to tears, yet smiling. Now, where the fuck do we begin with this film? Let's start at the beginning. Tyra's absent parents are explained. They're lawyers traveling abroad. She lives alone, which is fine given her age. She is 18. Still, to leave your daughter in a giant house alone for the foreseeable future is a questionable decision. Tyra doesn't plan on staying there for long, though, as she wants to get out of Tennessee and go to college at Yale. Parents better get back soon, because that house is giant, and someone needs to take care of it. Now for the meat of the story. Cairo and Jonathan Miller. They meet when Cairo comes to class early, and as soon as she leaves, he goes through her things. A note to all teachers, please do not go through your students' belongings, especially not if you notice they have an erotic book like Cairo, and please don't let your fellow teachers pick it up and start reading it aloud, like Miller's best friend and fellow teacher, Boris Fillmore. This Boris Fillmore also happens to be the object of Cairo's friend Winnie's desires, even though it is said once that she claims to be a lesbian. The plot continues as Cairo and Jonathan establish a connection of two intellectual minds, boosted by the fact that Cairo read Jonathan's book of romantic short stories and desires the love he describes, a madman's love. He reads that sentence in what appears to be a bathtub converted reading nook, which is not only creative, but kind of terrifying. What if she turns on the water by accident? This is where I believe she first feels attracted to him, even though she doesn't realize it yet. She craves a madman's love, and when she later begins to pursue Miller, she thinks he can provide it. Cairo and Winnie have a conversation about Fillmore and Winnie's pursuit of him, which leads Winnie to tell Cairo that Miller has an eye on her. Cairo brushes it off at first, but Winnie insists, leading to her seeing the teacher-student relationship differently. Of course, quote-unquote prove that he's attracted to her, Miller asks Cairo to stay after school. This timing is perfect, and it stokes the flame that Winnie's words ignited in Cairo. Like I said earlier, he begins to believe that he can give her a madman's love. When she and Miller meet, he quotes a line of her latest story about a spider, word for word, shocking Cairo. Is he really attracted to her? He dismisses the allegation having memorized the piece, claiming to be eidetic, also known as having a photographic memory. This is never brought up again. He responds by quoting a line from his note. Miller is impressed by her and brings up the actual reason he asked to meet. He has an option to get preferential treatment and get a jump start on the midterm by writing a short story in the style of a certain writer. Pyro takes this as a sign of his attraction to her, and I honestly don't blame her. If your best friend tells you that your teacher who asks to meet you after class, quotes your story, gives you buckets of compliments, bears his soul to you, and then offers you preferential treatment was attracted to you, I believe that friend. It is important to note, however, that Miller's tone changes dramatically throughout the movie. He goes from actually seeming attracted to Cairo to brushing her off entirely. This could be due to the fact that Cairo is an unreliable narrator, and we see things from her perspective. Back to the story, Cairo accepts the offer, and Miller attempts to get her to like her hometown by telling her about the poetry salon and offering her to attend. When Cairo leaves, she realizes Miller's taken her phone with him, which, if it were an accident, would be mildly weird. If it weren't an accident, it would be a major creep move. I did some research into being eidetic, and it didn't give me an answer to whether he remembered taking her phone or not, so I can't say if he mistook it for her own or if he was being creepy. My take, he knew he took it, as most people know what their phone looks like, and Kyra's bright green case is certainly not easily confused for one's own. Regardless of what actually happened, he calls and he picks up. They agree to meet at her house and have him return the phone. Miller drives to her house in the rain, and she greets him in a suggestive dress. They stand in the rain and kiss. Cut to black. The phone did get returned, so mission success? This whole chunk of the movie gives me major heebie-jeebies, as it insinuates that Miller is actually attracted to her, at least somewhat. As we know, this changes later. However, the fact that he doesn't deny her kiss is interesting. Kyra ends up attending the poetry salon that Miller told her about, and they sit together on a couch love seat thing while listening to a poem. After, they share a cigarette and talk outside. Kyra decides to use Henry Miller, erotic writer extraordinaire, as her inspiration for her short story. When she finishes the story and turns it in, Miller is greeted with a hard surprise. And yes, I mean that kind of hard. It turns out to be an erotic fantasy about a student and her English teacher, which he reads in the shed using one hand. Why is he in the shed? This would be a good time to mention his wife. Yes, Jonathan Miller, student kisser, is married to one Beatrice June Harker. Their relationship is sexual when she's drunk, and strained when they're not initiating any touching. He sends him to the shed that evening because she quote unquote just can't work, with him across the table from her on his computer. Ignoring that she does the same day in and day out, he even dedicated his book to her, saying that every word was for her. Their relationship can be summarized in the following paraphrase: Beatrice married a writer and got a teacher. The next day, Miller confronts Pyro about her story. He tells her that it's inappropriate and he should choose a new author. Pyro refuses, telling him that it represents their relationship. Miller denies it, calling her a child. When she asks what she was before, he tells her she was a student. Pyro does not like this answer, as anyone who wrote an erotic short story for someone and was then shot down would. As she leaves, he slides her story, with the dedication to him, love her, into the vice principal's school mailbox. Shit is about to go down. This is where we see Miller's attitude shift, going from someone who treated Kyra specially and even kissed her, to becoming cold and even calling her a child. Why is this? Maybe he finally came to his senses. Maybe it was just a plot hole. There is no real explanation for his sudden change. That evening, Winnie tries to comfort a crying Cairo and offers to distract her. Kyra suggests she texts Fillmore and tries to get with him, which she does. This turned into the two of them sending pictures of them making out near topless, which was certainly not a fan service decision. Fillmore deletes the pictures, but I'm sure he has that image burned into his mind forever. This is where we see what Kyra Miller should have been, a student crush followed by an unwilling teacher. Instead, Miller allowed Kyra's attraction to bloom. Now, he must pay the price. Fillmore and Miller are called into the vice principal's office separately for questioning. It's quickly seen that hell hath no fury like a Kyra sweet scorn, as she says exactly the right things and Miller the wrong. Miller even lies about not seeing her outside of school, eventually realizing there's nothing he can say to get him out. He is put on probation. I wish we'd have been able to see the entire interrogation, as it would be interesting to see Miller dig himself in deeper before coming to his realization. What could he even have to explain himself? He did all the wrong things, and it is coming to bite him in the ass. When he comes back to the picture to try and persuade Cairo to drop the charges against Miller in court, but Cairo refuses. She's had her heart broken and has come this far. Why should she stop now? Winnie tells her that she'll testify against her, to which Kyra reminds her of the picture of them that they sent to Fillmore. If Winnie tries to stop it, Kyra will incriminate Fillmore. Cue ending scene. Miller and Kyra see each other at the courthouse, Kyra shedding a tear and giving him a small smile. Badass. A lot to unpack. In case you didn't get it when I explained the entire movie twice, Kyra is her own hero and villain. She's her own undoing, yet she brings herself justice in the best way she knows how. Plus, she gets a college admissions essay out of it, so worth it? It depends on the interpretation. Was Miller leading her on? Was he a victim? In my ever so humble opinion, he was both. He kissed her, he allowed Henry Miller, he even masturbated to her short story. But he also tried to step back when he realized things were getting out of hand. He placed down boundaries, and Kyra crossed them. He was partially at fault, but he was still a victim. Kyra's sweet. What was she? Similarly to Miller, she was both a perpetrator and a victim. Miller, being the adult, could not have kissed her or allowed her to kiss him. He couldn't have shared a cigarette with her. He could have shot down all of her attempts to come onto him as they popped up. But he was also at fault. Regardless of being 18, being romantically or sexually involved with a teacher is immoral and probably illegal. Kyra was smart. She knew that. She even expressed those views in the beginning of the film, but she fell from grace. She ignored her own morals, and they eventually died with her. Kyra is a fallen angel. Regardless of Miller's role in the affair, she knew better. Regardless of having her heart broken, she chose to destroy his life. Kyra took a complete 180 in the film, and that fall from grace is what makes her so interesting and what makes the film worth watching. It's important to note, however, that this film is labeled a thriller, but it's not. When I think of thriller, I think of suspense. This film is just drama. There is not much suspense other than the question of what will Miller do, and so it is important to keep that in mind. Draw from this film. First of all, don't let your friends talk you into seducing your teacher. Seriously though, this film is a twisted coming of age. It's about a girl's first brush with consequences of her own actions, and learning that she can manipulate them. If I hadn't been trying to watch my favorite gay vampire show, I never would have found it, and that would have been a shame. Kyra Sweet and Jonathan Miller are great characters, and their story, regardless how weird, is worth a watch. Fallen angels and their impulses are always interesting stories, and this one is no exception. Thank you for listening to Nightshade's Ramble of the Day. Go watch Miller's Girl, or rewatch it, and stick around for more.